Hello, everyone, and welcome to Overtime. With me today is Zandering. We're going to be doing an After Dark shortly after this. It's currently scheduled for 10. We need about 10 p.m. Eastern. That's about an hour from now. It's going to take about 10 minutes to change the systems over to After Dark, and then we'll do that. Anyone who wants to call in, chat about any of this, shoot the shit, try to work it out in their own heads. I think we all have a lot we want to talk about. So After Dark has been really past due. So tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern, or about 10 minutes after the end of the show, whichever comes second, we'll get that done. A high-powered electrical line to the Chernobyl nuclear power plant has been destroyed. The plant is decommissioned, but it does require electricity to cool the nuclear waste and nuclear fuel, which is still on site. We've been getting mixed reports about what this actually means. The IAEA has said that it's not really a concern, but it's unclear as to whether they said the plant itself is not a concern or the waste is not a concern. We really don't know. What we do know is that, the first report from the, let me see if I can find his name here. The head of the Energy Commission, Ukrainian's energy minister, he said that the country is doing everything possible to restore electricity as soon as possible. However, he at first seemed to suggest that it could be a very serious problem if those rods or the spent fuel was not cooled, and then said, it's not all that big a deal. So who knows? We're trying to figure out exactly what that means. Yeah, let me know if there's an audio issue. There shouldn't be, but, who knows. All right, so going forward, I'll take care of that too, just in case. While acknowledging that there is a significant cost for Americans to enact these sanctions, Biden reminded people today that the cost to Russia is far more devastating than the cost that we are facing, and that it was really the only way to try to get Putin to disengage from this course of action. High-level talks between Ukraine and Russia continue today. China is reporting that Vladimir Putin is willing to meet one-on-one with Ukrainian President Zelensky. However, after seeing Russia's demands in order to have a ceasefire, even French President Emmanuel Macron said that these conditions would not, quote, not be acceptable to anyone. All right, I'm not sure what's causing that. I'll look into it. We'll see if Xander, can you give me a sound check real quick? We'll see if they're hearing the popping with you or if it's just me.
I really hope I'm not popping.
All right, we'll see.
Am I popping to everybody else? How do I sound to everyone else?
You sound like you're recovering from a bad cold, is what you sound like. Let me just quickly check one thing on the mic. No, I mean everything should be okay. I'll try to. Let me see if I can move the mic a little closer to me here, and that may improve things. All right, so. Even French President Emmanuel Macron said that these conditions that they had for a ceasefire would not be acceptable to anyone. It looks like Russia is not making any effort to actually engage in a ceasefire. Russia has said that it will reopen evacuation corridors from Ukraine to Russia and to Belarus every day, 10 a.m. local time. So far, nearly 2 million people have fled the country, but less than 25,000 have successfully used the... okay, the sound is cutting in and out. I honestly don't. This is reporting the sound is okay on this end. All right, let me just take one quick look at the sound here and see if I can get any indication as to what's causing the problem. Okay, that's okay.
Now on my end watching on the tablet, the YouTube stream is jittering a bit, so it's like it's not quite buffering, but it's causing it to jitter a couple of times. I can see it on the screen when it does it, but I've just figured that's my crappy Wi-Fi out here.
No, I bet you it's the jitter that's causing it. So give me a sec. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shut down. We're having one or two technical issues. My keyboard cut out right before the show started, so I'm going without a keyboard. Most of the way the systems work shouldn't be a problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shut that down. I'm going to shut that down, and then that may clear up the signal a little bit. All right, so that's about I can do one more thing. I'm going to do one more thing here to try to improve the sound, and then I'll have done everything I can do. So hopefully this will improve things. All right, so where were we? Hopefully this will, I think there's a stutter in the connection, so hopefully that will clear up in a minute. Only about 25,000 people have actually successfully fled through the evacuation corridors. The shelling begins in these corridors almost immediately as soon as they open up. Russia has continued to escalate its attacks on civilian buildings and infrastructure, striking a maternity ward last night and children's hospital. The U.S. ambassador to the UN has called these attacks a war crime. The State Department refuses to call it that quite yet, but they're getting close. It also says that these attacks cannot be justified. The World Health... Okay, there it is. I'm hearing that sound. It's almost like crickets in the background. I hear that on your end ever since you've changed systems. I don't know what that is, but hopefully other people will confirm that I'm not going crazy. I'm actually hearing that noise, and it only comes on... Hold on a second. Yeah, it looks like it's coming in on your system. I don't know. All right. Let's see.
Okay, I've been muted, so...
As soon as you unmuted it, the sound went away. Mute yourself again, would you please? Nothing that time. I don't know. We'll see if other people heard it. I don't know. That's really weird. All right. We're getting some issues. So the World Health Organization has said that this attack on the hospital was the 24th attack on a civilian healthcare system in the Ukraine since the invasion started. They've also started using butterfly mines. We're going to show some footage of this in a little bit, and we're also going to talk about the butterfly mines. We have some pictures. I want to just show this briefly. This is a butterfly mine. They are phenomenally dangerous, and they are they are banned by every country that I'm aware of. Let me see if I can find a list of... we'll get into it in a sec. But these are banned munitions for very specific reasons, and we'll get into how and why in a minute. Meanwhile, let's see. The International Committee of the Red Cross says that the humanitarian situation in Mariupol is increasingly dire, and that hundreds of thousands of people, 420,000 I think at last count, are facing no food, no water, and no heat, electricity, or medical care. Very few people in the city have remaining food, and there's violence breaking out over any families that actually have food and are trying to keep it for themselves. It's getting stolen. People are breaking into cars, stealing the gasoline out of cars, even dismantling cars just to try to get at the gas tank. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said today that he believes Russia will in fact use chemical weapons in Ukraine as it is, quote, straight out of their playbook. He noted that they've already started saying that chemical weapons are being stored in Ukraine by the Ukrainian army and or by the Americans. Boris Johnson said that this will be used as a pretext to justify the use of chemical weapons in Ukraine. This echoes concerns that the U.S. has been having now for the last couple of days and issued just an hour or two before Boris Johnson weighed in. Meanwhile, Poland has agreed to send 21 MiG-29s to Ukraine. If the U.S. agrees to backstop the deal with modern F-14s. Initially, the U.S. kind of suggested that would be for it, and when Poland said that the deal would only work if the 21 MiG-29s were sent to a U.S. airbase in Germany, at that point we said absolutely not. We're going to discuss that because that's interesting. That smacks to me of a deliberate tanking of the deal. So I'm not sure how or why. We're going to try to get an expert on that, but that wasn't an accident. We'll talk about that in a minute. We're not the only ones here to have reached that conclusion. U.S. lawmakers on both sides have blasted the Biden administration for not transferring the aircraft. There is a purported fracture between the U.S. Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State as to how to handle the transfer of aircraft. Senator Jim Risch, the top Republican on the Foreign Relations Committee, told CNN that this kind of diversion was embarrassing. He said that Congress was nearly united on sending the planes to Poland. It would be nice if the executive branch could be that way as well. In what appears to be a coordinated, planned ambush, Ukrainian army seized, appears to have destroyed they had claimed originally that they destroyed an entire army tank regiment in Bevany, which is northeast of Kiev, and that they killed Commander Colonel A. Zakharov. We have an image of this. It does appear, from what we can tell, that a number of tanks escaped, but at least 6 have been confirmed destroyed, and we'll talk about the attack, and we'll show that in just a minute. Meanwhile, progress has begun from that main column and other forces towards the city of Kiev again. It is slow. They've only moved about 3 miles towards the city, but considering they were only 10 miles out, that's quite a bit. And they have completed roughly 2/3 of an encirclement of the city. A U.S. defense official says that basically, for all intents and purposes, it is now isolated from the rest of Ukraine and is completely cut off. Meanwhile, Russia is increasingly relying on artillery and mortars, as well as long-range bombardment and missiles from aircraft and from mobile missile launchers in order to avoid ostensibly the kind of attack that happened today. We'll get into that again as well. They have been deploying more forces to encircle both Kiev and Kharkiv. We'll show you where that is. They appear also to have captured a second rail line, and an armored military transport was seen heading towards Melitopol, which is not Mariupol. Those are two. Melitopol has actually already fallen. It looks like they are sending reinforcements there. Yeah, that's roughly it. So we'll see what happens. They're probably going to try to use that as a staging area now that they've captured 2 rail lines. Let's see. Currently, Russia has occupied Kherson, Melitopol, and Berdyunsk. Russia has approached China and asked them to supply aircraft parts for both military and civilian aircraft. According to the Russian state news, China has refused, leaving Russia with very little options for maintaining their aircraft. The Chancellor of Germany has said that he has rejected any fast-tracking of Ukraine's membership into the EU. Quote, "It's very important that we continue to pursue things that we have indeed decided on the past," he said ahead of the UN summit in France. Quote, "There is no such thing as fast-tracking of ascension. Such a thing does not exist." He needs a better writer. Meanwhile, Polish ambassador to the U.S. has said that sanctions on Moscow should last at least for a decade. Quote, "I think that if we wanted to retaliate for that invasion against Ukraine with punitive measures and by crippling the Russian economy, we have to be determined and ready to uphold sanctions for a longer term, because I'm afraid we're going to have to live with Mr. Putin for many years to come." All right, so what are we talking about? There was a pretty serious attack. There was a bombing. And the initial reports yesterday were no casualties, no deaths. But at this point, we believe at least 3 deaths of a maternity clinic in Ukraine. And what we're going to do here is, it was an airstrike that hit the hospital, and we're going to show you footage of that with audio. So let's see that.
Иди сюда. Там прошли, здесь прошли. Все полетело. Мама, что? Все. Заходите. Наберите вот эту девушку. Вопрос только в маме.
I'm going to pause it here for a second. A couple of interesting things about this. First of all, we're actually going to go back. The Russian embassy took a photo of this woman. I'm going to try to find her. We just saw her a second ago. A photo of one of the victims of the blast here was put up. Sorry, I let it. There it is. That woman right there. Oh, wow. Yeah, I got like her. She's been the footage of her has been circulating around Twitter. The Russian embassy put up that picture and said that she's actually an actress and that this entire thing was staged. They showed the actress that they claimed that this woman was, and that all of this was fake. They talked about all the makeup used and all this other stuff. There was one report that she actually is, in fact, that actress, and she happened to be there and was injured, but that this was not fake. I don't know. What I do know is that Twitter actually took that tweet down from the Russian embassy and took down several other tweets, including tweets of the actress doing advertisements for hand sanitizer and all that other good stuff. So it looks like they're trying to be reasonably aggressive in stopping sort of propaganda or I don't know what you want to call it at this point. Anyways, we know at least 17 people were wounded. 3 were killed in that blast. And let's see. Okay, now I want to pause it here for 1 second. And the reason is because you probably cannot see it. That bridge was destroyed to prevent the advancing Russians. And what has been happening now is that Ukrainians, in order to flee the city, have been trying to make their own bridges out of the area. But if you look, the bridge you can see is in 2 parts. If you look at the southern part of the destroyed bridge and go just a little bit down, what you will see is a blast area and multiple craters there. Now, that was one of the escape routes for the civilians. They were going, they couldn't use the bridge anymore, so they're going out just alongside down at the bottom. They had crafted a number of, and in fact, I think you can even see it from this image. You can see that some wooden structures that they had used to try to cross the bridge. And as soon as they got to the other side, or not cross the bridge, cross the river, as soon as they got to the other side, they were shelled. I don't think I can expand this here. It may or may not move in, but they've been bombarding the civilian escape routes now that the bridge is gone. So you can see that blast area right there. So as they try to get around these bridges, they're being shelled, so they can't even leave. This is all from the Wall Street Journal, by the way.
Мама! Нет электричества, у нас ничего есть, у нас нет ничего, медикаментов, ничего нет. Сохрани. Мы потом выйдем, Лидочка. Что вы не видите? Печально. Да?
Там 2 выхода.
Ну вы просмотрите, чтобы...
Я все просмотрела.
All right, that was from the Wall Street Journal. As I said, and what they're facing now is it's actually dehydration that kills you faster. The average human can usually go you can usually go actually about 2 weeks without food. Believe it or not, you can only go usually about 4 days without water. And so that right now is the biggest problem. They do have some snow, and they've been able to melt the snow, but they're not getting a lot of snow. And, it's barely above freezing during the day, so there hasn't been a whole heck of a lot they can do now. It does appear both France and the U.S. is at this point claiming that they expect chemical weapons to be deployed by the Russians. They've done it in the past, and at this point they do appear to be setting up a false flag pretext in order to do that. They have definitely started to use the butterfly mines. These are butterfly mines. What makes these banned in most countries and considered a war crime is, A, they look like toys, and children see these and pick them up and play with them. They also are designed not to detonate right away, so the children can play with them, share them amongst their friends, and then they'll detonate after a while. They are actually armed just by dropping them out of an airplane. You drop them out, and the motion of them coming down arms them. They don't necessarily, you can pick them up and play with them for a little bit before they'll detonate, and that's deliberate. These are actually designed to cause, I think the name for these things was toe busters. They're designed specifically to blow off people's legs, do serious damage to their feet so that they can't walk and have to be carried, but to keep them alive. The goal is to just maim the people who are victim of these things, so that any military or civilians trying to get out of the area are now slowed by carrying the people who are injured. So this is a horrific device. It really has. It was actually developed by the U.S. It was developed as an anti-personnel weapon and is now essentially used against civilians by the countries that do deploy them. We've seen those deployed before in Afghanistan. In fact, In Time has talked about the deployment of those exact weapons before. We have not received official confirmation yet by the UN or by any independent source that these are actually being used, but multiple reporters on the ground say that they've seen them being dropped out of helicopters, and you can see them fall down because they do the twirly thing, and they are being dropped along specifically the evacuation routes that are being used by the civilians to get out of the war zones. So at this point, and once again, that is irrefutable targeting of civilians with anti-civilian weapons explicitly along those corridors. There's no pretext anymore. They've said, well, we've tried to stop, but there's been firing from those corridors, and we know there hasn't because we've got satellite imagery. But nonetheless, at this point, they're dropping anti-personnel mines along those corridors and then saying, oh, we've opened them up. Anyone who wants to can come on down. It's really atrocious. And again, it's hard to say and believe as I'm saying it that they would use chemical weapons. But at this point, they've done everything short of that. They do appear to be setting up that pretext. So I think that's something that we are going to have to contend with. So I'm definitely we're having some issues with the internet over here. So hopefully we're not going to get disconnected. If we are, we'll figure out how to deal with that. But I've been disconnected from the live chat several times, so I can't actually see. I know that there's conversation happening, but I'm unable to keep up with it. I apologize. I'll try to refresh it, and we'll restart our systems before after dark. Let's see, was there anything else? And then I do want to get to a Xandering, but I want to really quickly, let's see, this is I'm trying to figure out which one this is. Did we already show this one? Okay, no, I think we did. This was about the targeting of civilians. We also know there's a fire right now outside of one of their universities. The university does have radiological elements there. Apparently, it's not in any danger of. Let me check this out. All right, so okay, this is the children's hospital that we just showed. There's a children's hospital and maternity ward.
Civilians have been badly hit.
Journal reporters and the news intelligence agency Storyful corroborated dozens of video clips shared by Ukrainian officials and residents. Analysis of those videos shows that despite the Kremlin's denials, Russian forces have been hitting civilians across Ukraine as resistance slowed their military advances. Chernihiv is a city in northern Ukraine, home to more than 280,000 people. Its strategic location, northeast of Kyiv and near the border with Belarus, has led to a heavy presence of Russian forces in the area. Near the building seen in this footage, there's a hospital, a hotel, shops, but no sign of Ukrainian military presence or facilities, apart from a checkpoint manned by a few volunteers, according to residents. In that neighborhood, a dashcam recording posted to social media shows the powerful explosion. Footage shows a children's playground after the blast, as well as the remains of a pharmacy, which Google Earth images show previously looked like this.
So it's a place you go shopping, then take your kids to go and play in the playground a little bit. It's a very quiet, pleasant residential area.
The woman who shot this video, who is also a journalist, told the Wall Street Journal that she was shopping when the attack happened. She rushed home where her son was with his grandmother.
Her son and his grandmother survived, but you see, you know, they're now in a difficult situation. No gas, no electricity, everything smashed up, terrible destruction.
The family managed to flee a few days after the attack. But in many cities under siege, residents say they've been trapped and are struggling to survive. In the southern city of Mariupol, there were scenes of desperation as dead bodies could be seen uncollected on the streets. Ukraine and Russia said more than once that they had agreed on some logistics for humanitarian corridors to let residents flee some cities, including Mariupol, but efforts were complicated by continued fighting. On March 9th, President Vladimir Zelensky was one of several Ukrainian officials to share videos showing a severely damaged children's hospital. Russia's foreign minister said the hospital was being used as a base by Ukrainian fighters, a claim denied by the city's mayor.
Окраины города лупят, все заминировано. Пока на сегодняшний день, на сегодняшнюю минуту не удалось провести переговоры, чтобы это было безопасно для мирных граждан.
Those trying to leave have also faced attacks. According to the mayor of Irpin, at least 8 civilians were killed by shelling during an evacuation attempt in this suburb of Kyiv. Scenes of destruction resemble each other across Ukraine. In Zhytomyr, which is located west of Kyiv, video shows a school building reduced mostly to rubble on March 4th. The footage was circulated on a Telegram channel about war videos.
It is something of a strange target for the Russians in the sense that it doesn't lie on the front lines.
And in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city, large-scale destruction of residential and historical buildings was documented for several days in a row, after Russian forces failed to capture major urban centers.
What the locals say is that this simply looks like a way to try to terrify them, to frighten them by indiscriminate bombing.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has denied that Moscow is targeting civilians. On March 7th, in a phone call with a European official, Putin said his forces were taking steps to save civilian lives by offering escape corridors for residents. He also accused Kyiv of obstructing those efforts, according to the Kremlin's account of the phone call. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has repeatedly denounced the attacks.
Ми не пробачимо розстріли беззбройних людей, руйнацію нашої інфраструктури. Ми не пробачимо сотні жертв.
In early March, the International Criminal Court opened an investigation into possible war crimes in Ukraine. With bombs and missiles pounding cities across the country, the United Nations said hundreds of civilians had died, many more had been wounded, and millions had fled, contributing to the worst humanitarian crisis in Europe since World War II.
All right. So again, we believe 2 million have successfully fled the country using the corridors. Only about 25,000 have gotten out. The corridors are now being mined with butterfly bombs. They're still under heavy attack. And we have one last piece of news before Xander and I open it up and chat about this a bit, and then we'll move off to overtime in a little bit. But there was an attack. It looks like an entire column of Russian tanks, and it looks like the Ukrainian army had set up an ambush for them. Normally, I guess these kinds of tanks, and Xandering will know better, so maybe Xandering, if you haven't seen this footage yet, you can watch it and tell me. The very little that I do understand about this is the tanks at the front and at the back of the column were hit first so that they couldn't escape. They couldn't go forward to get out. They couldn't go back to get out. And then they just started picking off the tanks. They now have more light anti-tank weapons. I think they have almost twice as many light anti-tank weapons as there are tanks in the area. And I would imagine they still need more, but at any rate, this is that attack. I don't know what okay, there we go. One second. That guy seems to, Google Earth went wrong. I don't know what okay, so right there is where you can see they hit the back first so that these guys couldn't back up. Now they're hitting the front. And then they just started picking off the tanks in the middle. Now, normally, as I understand it, there's actually, you try to have infantry alongside these tanks to protect them from this kind of attack. Apparently that wasn't done here. They are claiming that the commander was killed. It looks like it was a loss of about 6 tanks, which doesn't look to me to be a huge percentage of it. We do have footage of the aftermath. That's here. We're aware of some tanks, and then they ambushed more of them as they were coming down the road. And then I'll answer some questions in the live chat. Like I said, I've got no keyboard right now, so I can't actually type. So I apologize. I've been wanting to answer some of the live chat questions. I've been keeping an eye on them, and we will get to them in a second. So, Zandring, what are your thoughts?
I guess my thoughts are like, do you want to start World War III? Because this is kind of how you start World War III.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to, but yeah. So there was a question in the live chat if they use.
Yeah, but I mean, this is.
Yeah. Please.
Well, I mean, this. It's like you say, okay, well, we don't think that he wants to start World War III. We don't think he wants the West to actually get involved, directly get involved in a direct confrontation. So, what does he do? The exact things that will actually prod the West into getting involved, and that's committing, mass atrocities against innocent civilians. So I don't know. I mean, sure, he's waving around, I'm a nuclear-armed power, and if you get involved, we'll just start launching nuclear weapons at you. But that only goes so far. I understand the kind of shock and awe wanting to try and overwhelm the country with civilian losses, just the devastation and horror of the whole thing, to break the will of anybody to fight. But I mean, this is exactly how you end up with the West getting involved, like directly involved. So
even if they use chemical weapons,
the thought process here.
I mean, Assad used chemical weapons, and we said if you do that, we'll get involved, and we still didn't get us involved, and it was easier to get involved against Assad than it is to get involved against the Russians. Yeah, I see that, Porpoise. I get the reference. I love the reference. Thank you. Like I said, I wish I could type back, but I can't. I don't have access to the live chat right now. But yeah, there's been a lot of Fallout references. I think even if he uses chemical weapons, we're not going to go in. It now appears like he's using the butterfly bombs, which is just atrocious, and it's just designed to inflict maximum damage without killing civilians. Inflict maximum damage to civilians without killing them, so that you slow them down and make them even easier to target. It's again, it hasn't been confirmed, but we have pictures that at this point are credibly from Ukraine. We have individual journalists who said it. There's no news organization that has confirmed the use of the butterfly bombs, but apparently they've been deployed all along the evacuation corridors, which means you cannot use those. You just can't. It's really quite shocking.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think that the U.S. is going to get directly involved. And his calculus might be, after looking at what was threatened in Syria and then never followed through on, maybe he's still thinking that'll hold true. But when I look at the kinds of decisions that places like Germany and Poland are making right now, I am not convinced that they won't get involved directly and that, start actively aiding with equipment, actually putting equipment in place to help protect at least evacuation corridors and things like that. I'm not convinced that the U.S. will actually do much more than what we're doing right now, but I've seen Germany, Finland, Poland, even damn Switzerland. I've seen them do things that they've not done since, and even some of them haven't even done since World War II. So it's pretty shocking to see some of the things that's going on in Europe itself.
So my thinking is, so I'm reading the news about the F-16s and the MiG-29s, and so here was the original proposed plan. We are attempting to help all of NATO countries modernize their military. That includes replacing older MiG aircraft with more modern F-14s. And the Poland has 21 of the older MiG-29s. Now, Ukrainians can't actually fly the F-14, at least not as easily. They're not trained on that aircraft. They are, however, well trained on MiGs. So the idea was that Poland, of its own accord, not as a member of NATO and not at the behest of the U.S. government, but of its own accord, gives its 21 MiGs to Ukraine. The U.S., concerned, obviously, about the crisis in that area, decides to backstop those losses by supplying roughly 21 F-14s that would be paid for at some later date, but that at least Poland would have in the meantime, so that their military isn't dramatically weakened. So this was kind of a win-win across the board. Poland gets to update its Air Force significantly, and the older aircraft, which is the only aircraft that the Ukrainians can really fly easily, goes to Ukraine. This idea was originally floated ostensibly by the U.S. government. Poland appeared to agree, and then Poland tanked the deal. And I have to believe it was a deliberate tank. I don't know how or why, but I have to believe it was deliberate because the condition that they placed on it, we would never under any set of circumstances accept. And everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. And they made this condition public, which you wouldn't do to an ally unless there was something else going on. And the condition was, okay, we'll do that. We would love to do this, but, we just got to make sure that the MiGs are sent to the U.S. Air Force Base in Germany. No, we are then at that point involved. We have officially become involved if we hold those MiGs on their way to Ukraine. So we are not going to do that. And we had a discussion on the Discord. And by the way, come join us on the Discord. We're always discussing at least right now, we're constantly discussing what's going on, and we usually have news, in fact, well ahead of national news organizations, and we've been kind of curating the news as best we can. We also have channels there for philosophy, gaming, science, psychology, anything you could possibly want. Reverend Dr. Mowdy Esquire is in there covering all things psychological for us. So come on in and chat and learn what we're about. We've been starting to try to go back to our regular Tuesday shows, which is interviews, discussions on other topics, but we do carry the news. So obviously this has been very important, and we've been spending a lot of time on it, and we're going to continue to spend a lot of time on it so long as it continues to be something that needs to be covered. Let's see, oh dear Lord, I was talking about the F-16. So they tanked the deal. There's no way we would do that, and it gave us the ability to say no publicly. For some reason, I think we wanted that or needed that. I think they may have tanked it at our behest. I don't know. But I do know the condition that they casually placed on that, everybody knows would not be accepted. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. And the U.S. walked away from doing this. So I don't know what happened. I do know that it's not what it appears to be. Somebody asked them to tank the deal, and they did. Either they chose to do it on their own, or we asked them to tank it. Congress seems to have come up with roughly the solution. They're saying, well, gee, why has intelligence changed? Why are we not interested in helping anymore? And they didn't ask about the airbase, which means everybody knows the airbase was the pretext for getting out. So the question is, why? And nobody knows. But that deal is tanked. We don't know why. There you go. I don't know if you have any thoughts. I need somebody who has. I was hoping we could maybe chat with to name Colonel. Oh dear Lord, my brain is going for Cocktonoggin again with McMillan, Commander Lance McMillan. He may have some idea, even though it's a political issue. My hope is that he would have some idea as to what's going on. I don't know. I'm going to try to figure out if anybody's done a dive into why this deal was torpedoed, but that was a deliberate torpedo. So where are we? As you can see here, Kherson is still completely occupied, and to the best of our knowledge, well, we haven't been talking about it because the fighting hasn't been fierce there. There's no supply of food or water into that city the last we checked, so I don't know how they're operating. I do know they have at least some freedom of motion. There's a curfew, 8 p.m. I think it was, and anybody who's out after 8 p.m. they just shoot and kill. Anybody who's in groups larger than 2, they shoot and kill. But the city at least they're capable of moving around, and it's not being shelled actively. But to the best of my knowledge, there's no food or water supply going in, so I don't know what's going to happen there. This is Melitopol. We've been talking about that repeatedly. That city is completely occupied and is facing its own humanitarian crisis as well. But the worst is Mariupol, which we talked about repeatedly. It is strategic. It's of critical importance because they want to connect these 2 regions. They want to connect Crimea to the Donbass, and that means they're going to have the entire east coast under control. But that notwithstanding, it also means they'll be able to supply everything. So they have to get this. It is Highway M14, and it runs right through Mariupol. Mariupol is currently holding out, but they are out of food. People are now starving to death. We have reports of actual starvations. And I say starving to death. Obviously, that's a misnomer. They're actually dying of dehydration. They are out of food, but you can survive without food for about 14 days. You can only survive without water for about 4. So they're really technically dying of dehydration. Either way, there's no food, no water, and they're dying as a lack of it. It looks like they're going to both starve the city out and shell it. We do believe that it's the areas out of this city that have been mined. So at this point, they cannot get out. They are absolutely trapped, even if the city surrendered. I don't know that they'd be allowed to survive. It doesn't look like they're going to let Kherson survive. So as you can see here, they've started to actually move out of Donbass. They're trying to, it looks like, establish a connection here. They're not going to, there's no major roads there. They're not going to be able to do anything. But let's see, the biggies, of course, as always, as you can see here, this is Simu. Actually, it's Simi. Sumi is how that's pronounced. Sorry, Sumi. For all intents and purposes, is surrounded. They appear to have access to this road here and to the other road. There's no, it looks like you could get out to the west, but I think it's right now considered to be surrounded for all intents and purposes. It is. Where is, okay. Chernobyl, same thing. Kharkiv, which I think I passed. That should be right here. Here's Kharkiv. They are not completely surrounded, but they're being shelled heavily, and there's also, I believe, they've mined this way out. So at present, it appears there's no way out of Kharkiv. You could probably head a little further in west, but that's it. And what's most troubling, the capital, Kyiv, right here. They have now finally that column is moving again. It's moved about 3 miles. They have taken M06, which was the only major road out of there. M09, I think that's 09, M05. Right here, they can't use because it's being shelled. Anybody who tries to get out there, you can see they actually have the airport. They've got a few other areas here, and that road is useless. So for all intents and purposes, at this point, Kiev is surrounded and cut off. And I can't believe they're actually going to go in. It's been fortified. There are checkpoints. There are hundreds of checkpoints throughout the city. We have a photo. I don't think I put it in here. It's on the Discord of a Ukrainian checkpoint, and they're playing chess, but they don't have chess pieces, so they're using Molotov cocktails. I think anybody who goes into that city looking for a fight isn't coming out. So it looks like they're going to just shell it and try to starve it to death. And now that column is once again moving, admittedly slow. They've only moved about 3 miles in the last day, but before that they hadn't moved an inch for about 3 days. That column is now moving again, and I think that's obviously going to be a very big problem. So it looks like Kiev is about to undergo probably a massive assault. They're also, as you can see, they've just about made it here from the east. So now they'll be able to easily attack from the east and from the west. I think 48 hours from now, Kiev is going to be under a complete assault. Kharkiv has been under complete assault, and well, not a complete assault, just shelling. There was, I think, only 2 days where there was fighting in the streets, and for the most part, they haven't gone back to that. But those two cities are about to, I think, especially Kiev, is about to, I think, see the worst of it. Right now, it hasn't happened, and all the areas out of, I think, Kiev as well are being mined with the butterfly mines. It's absolutely horrific. And at this point, I'm not sure what they do except fight to the death, because it's that or suffer what's happening in these other cities, which is they're going to die anyway. They're going to be starved out. So I wish we had something better to tell you guys. We don't. It looks like it's getting worse. I don't think chemical weapons is going to be the line that gets NATO involved. I think you got a good point, as Andrew, which I think other countries may. Those countries can get involved and cannot trigger Article 5 if they go in on their own, because it's not defensive. So I don't know. Well, that's where we are. I don't know. Any other thoughts?
Well, that touches on a question that we did have up there. It says what the potential downsides of the West getting involved might be, as well as potential advantages, both for Ukraine. Well, if the West, meaning mostly, Western Europe, were to actually decide they were going to get involved and they were going to end this invasion, they could do so very quickly. There's enough military power in modern equipment in Western Europe that they could take out every single one of the attacking forces that Russia has moving on the cities in Ukraine, and they could take them out fairly quickly with airstrikes. The problem with that is that regardless of if they're a NATO country, even though acting in an offensive manner doesn't technically involve NATO at all, because they're a member of NATO, Russia's immediately going to say NATO's now attacked Russia, and this is now World War III. So the upside is they could save Ukraine, and if they decided to actually act decisively, they could absolutely save Ukraine and stop this invasion cold within a week. But a week from when they actually start, it would take some time to maneuver some of the equipment that they would need to do it. So that would take a bit of time. But once they actually started, they could probably stop everything dead within a week. But again, you're now declaring war on Russia. A NATO country would be declaring war on Russia. Russia is going to see it that way. NATO has now attacked Russia, and it is World War III. So the obvious downside to that is the specter of nuclear armed conflict comes in. So that's a big downside. Obviously, the plus side is, at least in the short term, the attacks stop. The cities can start seeing relief. Some of them, like Mariupol, is probably not going to see enough relief quickly enough, because they're already out of everything. So, say 2 weeks, a week to pre-plan everything, and let's say they expedite a force to stop the siege of Mariupol. It's still going to be, at least a minimum of a week or two before they could start getting stuff in there. Obviously, they'd probably start dropping C-130, pallets of supplies into the city, directly into the city. But they're in such a bad position anyway, you can't do any of this quickly enough. So, and that's assuming, again, that they decide decisively that they're going to go in and win this war. And I don't know that I just don't see that happening. Unless, maybe if, Western Europe, or I would say probably coming out of places more like Finland or Switzerland is probably who would get involved, not a NATO-aligned country. I'm sure that NATO would probably supply the country with all of the supplies and weaponry and all that stuff, and then let a non-NATO country actually get involved with direct troops. They're dancing along that line of NATO confronting Russia directly. So, the downside to that is World War III, and that becomes very dangerous because of nuclear-armed countries in direct conflict with each other. The benefit is Ukraine suffers fewer losses, and they can begin to reduce some of these humanitarian crises that Russia's implementing.
I believe it was a Princeton professor. Well, I think he was speaking at the University of Chicago, so it may have been from the University of Chicago. Was talking about how this is basically all the West's fault. He's made an argument for it. I think his argument has more than one faults, but nonetheless, one of the things that he pointed out is that we need to let Ukraine go, and we need to basically just say Putin's going to get it, and that all this fighting is doing is taking more lives. Now, the grounds for which he said that is because we're talking about what are national strategic interests. And these are interests without which your country cannot really survive. They are interests that are that important to your country. Ukraine is a national strategic interest for Russia. They are not for us. So we are treating it as if they are, and we're treating it as if we're willing to go to World War III over it. We're not. Russia is. So, we need to just sort of let it fall. One of his faults in this is, and he does address, when he's talking about this, he addresses, he says, well, it's a fallacy to think that that he's anything like Hitler and that he's really going to, try to take over the rest of the world, and you can't sustain or support that, which he doesn't make any argument that I see against that. He makes an argument for his position, but he doesn't undermine the other position, and he does not deal with the problem of what is in the U.S. strategic interest, and he even says this is the stability of the EU, and this threatens that, especially if he doesn't stop here, and I don't see why he's going to stop here, and he may say he's going to stop here, but he said that before taking Crimea. So, anyways, that's, yeah, I think Porpoise said something that I thought was interesting. Porpoise said that he's using our fear of nuclear weapons against us. He's using that fear against us. He absolutely is. That's actually a typical Russian thing. Russians are very interested in brinksmanship. I mean, that's again part of the Russian culture, and it's unfortunate, and it does mean that they can be very difficult to contend with, even when the army is not properly supplied and they refuse to lose, and they're willing to cut off every limb to keep from losing. So you've got this problem of they're perfectly happy to play with brinksmanship and to try to use that as a political tool. And two problems with that. One, it really incentivizes people doing crazy, stupid things. And two, it works until it doesn't. And once it doesn't, until it doesn't work anymore. And then the whole world's got a very big problem. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think he wants to start World War III. I don't think he wants to nuke the world. But I think, especially with the sanctions, he now sees certainly his regime, if not Russia in its entirety, at risk. And even if he's the one who put it there, it's not going to matter. What matters to him is how to keep it off of how to remove that risk, and I'm not sure that at least tactical nuclear deployments would be off the table in that case. This is escalating, and it's not escalating well, and I don't know, but I don't think the use of chemical weapons is going to cause NATO to go in. But I think Andrew's got a good point. I don't know if that answers the question. I do want to wrap things up. We do want to do an After Dark. It's going to take about 10 minutes to reboot and try to figure out we're having one or two technical issues. I want to see if we can get straightened out before we do After Dark. But we are going to do After Dark. The link is already up. You can find the link in the Discord. You'll also just, if you go to our channel, you should see it there as the next show. It was scheduled for 10 p.m. Eastern. We're just going to be a little late while we reconnect everything. But before we go, I also want to give Andrew a chance to say anything else that he wanted to say before we go. And then we'll reboot, and it's After Dark. So anybody who wants to come on in, the link will be in the description. I'll just tell you right now, it's live.intimeshow.com. If you click on that link, you can come into the show. I don't know if we're going to get the call-in number up. We'll see if we're going to get that up. But at any rate, you can still connect. And all right, thank you. You connect, and we'll answer. We'll shoot the shit. We're just going to talk about this and try to sort out. I think we've been through a lot of scary stuff before. I remember covering Iran attacking Iraq, and World War III was the number one trending hashtag on Twitter. So we've been through stuff like this before, but if you're not nervous by this point, you're not paying attention. If you're terrified at this point, don't be. There's a lot of very smart people, a lot of good people really trying to solve this, and I think the sanctions are going to work. I think they've got a decent shot at working for any number of reasons we've discussed, and I won't get into again. But this is obviously escalating in a way at this point, there is no good solution. We can't really just let these people die. We certainly can't let them take another country after this, then after this. But at this point, how do we stop him without engaging in this exact kind of brinksmanship? I do not know, but I think that's the last thing we all want. So, Xander, any final thoughts before we start to change over?
About the only thing I could say is one of the reasons why it doesn't seem like a whole lot's happening to help Ukraine is they've got to be able to figure out how to do it without starting World War III, because there is that fine line where you don't want forces just immediately clashing directly against Russia. So I think there's a lot of people that are working on how they can go about helping Ukraine without technically getting involved, or at least have deniability that they're actually involved, even though everybody will know that they are. So I think that's and of course, countries are going to have to look and say, hey, can we afford this? It's like, yeah, it sucks that country's going down to another kind of terrible, at least the leadership of the country is pretty terrible. But can we afford to get involved in this? So I think that's something that people are trying to, or at least other governments are trying to think about as well.
I'd like to point out, too...
And all we can do is watch.
Yeah. I'd like to point out, too, that, for me, right now, my biggest hope is in the oligarchs. They have they have deposed with extreme prejudice before, or the Politburo, just the high-level leadership has done this before, and they're looking at the same numbers we are, and they're looking at this the way we are, too, and they're trying to figure out, okay, they know at some point the escalation is going to continue, and the question is, are they going to wait until after that point and then try to act? Which it's too late. The only way that brinksmanship can work is that nobody knows where that line is. If anybody knew where that line was, it wouldn't be a threat, because we'd know, has this crossed the line or has it not crossed the line? The line is a very fuzzy area. That's how brinksmanship works, and the question is, how close do they want to get to that line before acting? And my hope is. Because in some ways they have more to lose than anybody else. They're rich, they're wealthy, and they just want to go back to that lifestyle. Okay, well, they're not going to be able to do so with Putin in office. And either this continues to escalate, or, so my hope is that that's the most reasonable course of action that's going to work. And, if we have to put out more assassination lists on LinkedIn, I guess that's what we'll do. I can't believe LinkedIn has become the place for international assassination contracts. I did not have that on my bingo card. I had Asteroid.
You've got so many of the job finding sites out there now. LinkedIn's just trying to find its niche.
It's done it.
But as far as
yeah.
Well, they're testing the waters. They've only let one so far.
That was still up as of yesterday. Yeah.
People don't. It's like I've seen, because I follow kind of the more prepper community too, and everybody's going nuts over there about that too. And it's like, look, until you see an actual NATO power declare war on Russia and move in force into Ukraine to stop this, and to directly engage Russian forces, you're not really needing to worry about World War III. We're going to see some price inflation, especially in, like we're seeing already. It's going to be worse in Europe than it is here. But I just paid over $5 a gallon for diesel today in Ohio. So, prices are going up a bit here, but it's not like we're in any danger here. So why people here are worried about it, I'm not sure. But people in Europe have a lot more concern, because that's actually in their backyard. But yeah, until there's a hell of a lot more motion going on with a lot more countries actually taking direct action, there's not a whole lot that's going to really change. It's still going to be really sucky poo in Ukraine. Russia's going to continue to target civilians, and we're going to have to sit back and see how bad it actually gets, see what kinds of, try and get our people in there to get supplies and try and get relief and get the civilians out of the way if they can. And that's pretty much all we can do. So unless there's some earth-shattering change, it's like the world isn't on the brink of war, though, of course, if you look at the war counter, we've been on the brink of war forever. So something serious is going to have to change before something significantly troublesome or worrisome pops up. So, you can feel bad for the Ukrainian people. There's plenty of organizations out there that are trying to get aid to them. If you feel the Holy Spirit and need to do something to help, maybe find one of those organizations and donate to them if that's what you want to do. Otherwise, just keep an eye on the situation and don't worry so much until something radically shifts.
All right, I was going to try to drop a link to the After Dark, but I don't have keyboard access right now, so I can't actually get the link. So if somebody has a link to I think Titan may have it. Titan, if you have a moment and can drop a link to After Dark in the description, that would be great. So we're going to go to credits. After the credits end, it's going to take me about 10 minutes. We're going to reboot everything over here, and hopefully that'll... So that's the level of technical expertise we have. It's like, okay, it's not working. First is the reboot. If that doesn't work, the second is the hammer, and hit the thing a couple times with the hammer, and let's see what that does. Porpoise snarls at me every time I do it, but I swear by that technique. So I think it's also just scaring the computer into submission. I think that can be done. That's I'll give it a shot. So depending on whether the hammer works or not, we'll have After Dark in about 10 minutes after the end of the credits, or never. I don't know. We'll see. So please join us. We have a couple interesting topics I think we want to talk about, including one that I think is Andring sort of inspired on dealing with this through humor, which is always difficult. So please join us for After Dark, again, about 10 minutes after the end of the credits. The link is already up. Hopefully that'll be dropped for you, and look forward to seeing you guys in about 10. And night all.
All right.